The crossroads of desperation. The scorching sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting its harsh golden light over the small, forgotten village nestled deep within the plains of West Africa. For as long as Savannah could remember, life had been a relentless battle against forces far beyond her control: poverty, hunger, and the unforgiving weight of survival. The eldest of four, she had become the backbone of her family ever since her father passed away, leaving behind nothing but a legacy of toil and hardship. Savannah's mother, once vibrant and full of hope, had long since lost the spark that once lit up her eyes. Years of struggling to keep her children fed had drained the life from her, and Savannah had assumed the role of provider at an age when most girls were dreaming of their future, not breaking their backs to sustain the present. Every day was the same: rising before dawn, working odd jobs for scraps of money, and returning home late in the evening to her family, who looked to her for their very survival. Each day the burden grew heavier, pressing down on her like the oppressive heat that choked the village. But today, something felt different. It wasn't just the heat that weighed on Savannah. It was the suffocating feeling that they were running out of time. The few coins she earned were never enough to buy more than a small portion of food, and her younger sister's thin, malnourished faces haunted her. Her mother was growing weaker, too, the years of stress taking their toll. Savannah knew that they couldn't survive like this much longer. Something had to change. And yet, as desperate as she was, there were no opportunities to improve their situation. The village was small and poverty was rampant. The wealthier members of the community were few and far between, and most of them kept their distance from those less fortunate. There was only one person who might offer a way out, but Savannah shuddered at the thought. Mr. Damba, a wealthy and powerful man in the village, had made his intentions clear. He had propositioned Savannah more than once, offering her money in exchange for a relationship she didn't want. His advances disgusted her, but with each passing day, the weight of her desperation made his offer harder to ignore. That afternoon, as Savannah returned home from yet another day of labor, she found her mother sitting on the worn-out mat in their one-room shack. Her eyes were closed, her face pale and gaunt, and her breathing was shallow. The sight jolted Savannah's heart. Her mother was not just tired, she was ill. And without proper food or medicine, Savannah feared that her mother wouldn't make it much longer. Something snapped inside Savannah at that moment. She couldn't just stand by and watch her family wither away. They needed help, and they needed it now. She had to do something drastic, even if it meant going against everything she believed in. Savannah knew what she had to do, but it terrified her. That evening, as the sky turned from burnt orange to the deep blue of dusk, Savannah made her way to Mr. Damba's compound. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hands trembling as she approached the grand, gated entrance. The opulence of the place felt foreign, almost otherworldly, compared to the squalor she and her family lived in. It was hard to believe that just a few feet separated two completely different worlds. A guard at the gate eyed her suspiciously before letting her in. Savannah swallowed her pride and walked forward, her legs feeling like lead. Mr. Damba greeted her with a sly smile, his eyes gleaming with the knowledge that she was here out of necessity and not desire. He led her into his lavish living room, where the furniture was adorned with rich fabrics and expensive decorations, luxuries Savannah could never even dream of owning. "I knew you'd come around," he said, his voice slick and confident. "Everyone has their price." Savannah didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat felt tight, her mind racing as she sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, her hands clenched in her lap. Mr. Damba offered her a drink, but she declined, too nervous to even think about eating or drinking. He continued to talk, weaving promises of wealth and security, of a life where she would no longer have to worry about where her next meal would come from. But Savannah's thoughts were elsewhere, on her mother's frail body, her sister's hungry faces, and the overwhelming need to escape this life of endless struggle. As Mr. Damba excused himself to freshen up, Savannah's eyes wandered around the room, taking in the wealth that surrounded her. And that's when she saw it. Tucked under the edge of the coffee table was a large leather bag, partially hidden but not enough to escape her notice. Something about it drew her in, and without thinking, she leaned forward and opened the bag just a crack. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside, stacks of cash were neatly packed, more money than Savannah had ever seen in her life. Her hands shook as she realized the magnitude of what she had found. This was it, the answer to her prayers. With this money, she could save her family. She could buy food, medicine, and maybe even a way out of this wretched village. But stealing it, the thought made her stomach churn. Savannah had never stolen anything in her life, and the idea of taking this money, of crossing that moral line, was terrifying. Yet, as her mind raced with conflicting thoughts, one image kept coming back to her. Her mother, sick and growing weaker by the day. Her sisters, starving and helpless. She couldn't let them suffer any longer. She couldn't stand by and watch her family fall apart. With trembling hands, Savannah made her decision. She grabbed the bag, her heart racing as she stood up and moved toward the door. Her body felt numb, her thoughts jumbled as she tried to calm her racing heart. She had to move quickly before Mr. Damba returned, before the guilt consumed her and she changed her mind. Slipping out of the house, Savannah darted into the shadows, clutching the bag of money close to her chest. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the village, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. As she looked back toward the village, the reality of what she had done began to sink in. Savannah had crossed a line, one she could never come back from. But there was no turning back now. This money was her family's salvation. She had to believe that. Taking one last glance at the village, Savannah turned and walked into the night, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with danger, uncertainty, and a secret that could destroy everything if it ever came to light. But for now, she had hope. The weight of decisions, Savannah's feet carried her quickly away from Mr. Damba's compound, the cool night air barely registering against her flushed skin. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, guilt, and overwhelming relief. Every step she took, every breath, felt like a countdown toward the unknown. The leather bag, heavy with cash, thudded against her side, a constant reminder of the irreversible decision she had just made. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see guards or Mr. Damba himself chasing her, demanding the return of what she had taken. But the streets were quiet. The village, normally bustling with activity during the day, was now eerily still. Only the distant chirping of crickets broke the silence. Savannah knew she didn't have much time. Sooner or later, Mr. Damba would discover the theft. His reputation in the village was built on fear and intimidation. He wasn't the type of man who would let a slight go unanswered, especially not something as significant as $30,000. Her pace quickened. She had to get home, pack, and leave before sunrise. There would be no time for explanations, no goodbyes. The fewer people who knew what she had done, the safer they would be. As she neared her family's modest hut, nestled among other rundown homes at the edge of the village, Savannah felt a pang of guilt so sharp it nearly stopped her in her tracks. Her mother, her sisters, they had no idea what she had done. They didn't know the lengths she had gone to, the risks she had taken to ensure their survival. And they couldn't know. Not ever. It would be too dangerous for them to carry that knowledge. Savannah knew the truth had to stay buried with her. Quietly, she pushed open the door to their one-room home. The familiar creak of the door nearly made her heart stop, but the soft sound of her mother's labored breathing reminded her that they were all asleep. The dim light from the moon filtered through the gaps in the thatched roof, casting a faint glow over her family. Her sisters were curled up together on the floor, the thin frames barely making an impression on the worn-out mats. Her mother lay on a cot near the corner, her face pale and drawn, her chest rising and falling slowly as she struggled for every breath. Savannah swallowed the lump in her throat. The sight of her family in such a fragile state reaffirmed her decision. She had to protect them. She had to give them a chance, no matter the cost. Moving as quietly as she could, Savannah slipped over to a small chest near her mother's cot and retrieved a ragged cloth bag. It was all she had to carry her belongings, but it would have to do. She packed a few pieces of clothing, a small container of water, and some dried bread, just enough to get her through the next few days. Finally, she reached into the leather bag and pulled out a stack of cash. She counted it quickly, her hands shaking as the enormity of what she was about to do settled over her. She left a portion of the money on the table next to her mother's cot, wrapped in a piece of cloth. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to buy food and medicine, at least for a little while. She couldn't leave them with nothing. That would be cruel. As Savannah prepared to leave, she hesitated, her gaze lingering on her mother's frail form. She knelt beside her, careful not to wake her, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm doing this for you, for all of us. I'll come back one day, I promise." Her mother stirred but didn't wake. Savannah kissed her forehead, then stood and turned toward the door. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, to leave without saying goodbye properly, without explaining. But if she stayed, if she told them the truth, she would only be putting them in danger. With one last look, Savannah slipped out of the house and back into the night. The next morning, the village awoke as usual, but Savannah was already miles away, moving swiftly through the dense foliage that bordered the village. Her destination was uncertain, but she knew she had to put as much distance as possible between herself and Mr. Damba. She had heard rumors of a city, far to the east, where opportunities were abundant, where people could disappear and start over. There wasn't much to go on, but it was all she had. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Savannah's resolve wavered. The weight of the bag and the unforgiving terrain began to take their toll. Her legs ached and the heat was oppressive, beads of sweat rolling down her back as she pushed forward. She had never left the village before, never even imagined that she could. The world beyond had always seemed so far out of reach, a place where dreams went to die. But now, with no other choice, she was in it, and it terrified her. By midday, Savannah was exhausted. She found shelter beneath a large tree, its wide branches offering a reprieve from the blistering sun. Sitting down, she pulled out a piece of bread and nibbled on it, her thoughts consumed by what lay ahead. The city, if it even existed, felt impossibly far away. And even if she made it there, what then? What would she do with the money? How could she start a new life with nothing but fear and desperation to guide her? As she rested, a figure approached in the distance. Savannah's heart leaped into her throat, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Was it Mr. Gamma's men? Had they already caught up with her? She ducked behind the tree, clutching the leather bag to her chest, her breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it wasn't a threat. It was a woman, an older woman, hunched over with age, carrying a bundle of sticks on her back. She was dressed in simple, tattered clothes, much like the villagers back home. Savannah's initial fear gave way to curiosity. The woman paused when she reached the shade of the tree, clearly exhausted from her trek. Savannah, still wary, watched from her hiding spot as the woman set down her bundle and wiped the sweat from her brow. "Are you hiding, child?" The woman's voice cracked through the silence, though it was gentle and without judgment. Savannah stiffened. How had she known she was there? She considered staying silent, but something about the woman's tone disarmed her. Slowly, Savannah stepped out from behind the tree, clutching the bag tightly. "I'm not hiding," Savannah replied, though the quiver in her voice betrayed her. "I'm resting." The old woman chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling with a wisdom that only years of hardship could bring. "Resting? Looks to me like you're running." Savannah's heart skipped a beat. Did the woman know? How could she? Panic surged again, but the woman held up a hand as if to calm her. "Don't worry, child," she said softly, easing herself down to the ground. "I'm no threat to you. I've seen your kind before, those who carry heavy burdens. You wear it on your face." Savannah sat down across from her, uncertain of what to say. She wanted to get up and leave to continue her journey, but something about this woman felt safe, like she had seen more of life than most people ever would. "You're running from something, aren't you?" the woman asked gently, or maybe running towards something. Savannah didn't answer right away. Her throat felt tight, her mind too full of conflicting emotions to make sense of them all. But after a long pause, she finally whispered, "Both." The old woman nodded knowingly, her eyes softening. "I see. Sometimes the only way to survive is to run. But remember, child, no matter how far you go, you can't run from yourself. Whatever burden you carry, you'll have to face it one day." Savannah didn't respond, but the woman's words lingered in her mind long after she had gathered her sticks and continued on her way. Alone again, Savannah sat beneath the tree, staring out into the endless horizon. The journey ahead seemed more daunting than ever, but she couldn't turn back. Not now. With a deep breath, Savannah stood, adjusted the strap of the leather bag, and continued walking. Echoes of the past, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the vast, arid landscape. Savannah trudged onward, her steps heavy with fatigue and the burden of her decision. The weight of the leather bag was a constant reminder of the gamble she had taken, and the haunting memory of her family. Savannah approached cautiously, her eyes wide with awe and apprehension. She had heard stories of cities from the villagers, but seeing it in person was an entirely different experience. The streets were crowded, filled with vendors, traders, and residents going about their daily lives. The noise was constant, a cacophony of voices, music, and the clattering of carts and hooves. As she navigated through the bustling streets, Savannah tried to keep a low profile. She had no idea how to find Fatima's shelter, but she hoped that someone in the city might be able to guide her. The leather bag felt heavy with both the physical weight of the money and the emotional burden of her actions. She had to find a way to start over to make a new life without drawing unwanted attention. Her search led her to a bustling marketplace, where the vibrant colors and smells were almost overwhelming. She wandered through the stalls, her eyes scanning for any sign that might lead her to Fatima's shelter. After a few hours of fruitless searching, she decided to take a break and sit on a nearby bench. Exhaustion was beginning to catch up with her, and the weight of her decision felt more pressing with each passing minute. As she rested, a young man approached her, his face obscured by a hat and a scarf. He looked around cautiously before speaking in a low voice. "You look lost. Can I help you with something?" Savannah stiffened, her instincts on high alert. She glanced at the man, noting his serious demeanor and the careful way he spoke. "I'm just trying to find a place to stay," she said, her voice guarded. The man nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "There's a shelter not too far from here. It's run by a woman named Fatima. She's known for helping travelers in need." Savannah's heart skipped a beat. This must be the shelter Amina had mentioned. "Do you know where I can find it?" The man gave her directions, his gaze lingering on her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Be careful in the city," he said before disappearing into the crowd. Grateful, Savannah followed the directions to Fatima's shelter. It was located in a quieter part of the city, a modest building with a sign that read, "Safe Haven for Travelers." The sight brought a wave of relief. She had made it. She had finally found a place where she could rest, regroup, and hopefully find a way to build a new life. As she entered the shelter, the warmth and coziness of the place contrasted sharply with the bustling city outside. The interior was simple but inviting, with comfortable seating and the comforting aroma of cooking food. Fatima, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, welcomed her with open arms. "Welcome, dear," Fatima said, her voice soothing. "We have a place for you to rest. I'm glad you found us." Savannah felt a wave of gratitude and exhaustion wash over her. She was finally safe, at least for now. As she settled into her new surroundings, she knew that the journey ahead was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope that there might be a chance to rebuild and find a new path forward. The path to redemption. The following days at the shelter were a mixture of relief and uncertainty for Savannah. The safe haven for travelers under Fatima's care provided her with comfort and security that she hadn't experienced in weeks. The warm meals, clean bedding, and the quiet camaraderie of fellow travelers offered a temporary respite from her worries. Yet the weight of her past actions remained a constant shadow, threatening to undo the sense of peace she had begun to build. Fatima's shelter was a sanctuary not only for those seeking refuge, but also for those in search of purpose and direction. Fatima had a talent for guiding people toward their goals, and her advice was sought after by many who passed through the shelter's doors. Savannah felt a deep gratitude toward her, but also an underlying sense of shame. How could she ever repay the kindness she had received, especially when her past actions had been so tainted? The days turned into weeks, and Savannah began to adjust to her new environment. She took on small tasks around the shelter, helping with cooking, cleaning, and organizing supplies. The work was modest, but it kept her occupied and distracted her from the gnawing doubts that plagued her mind. Fatima watched her with a knowing gaze, as if she could sense the turmoil within Savannah. One evening, after the day's chores were done, Fatima sat down with Savannah at a small table in the common room. The two women were alone, and the other travelers having retired to their quarters. Fatima poured tea for both of them, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were carefully choosing her words. "I see you've been working hard," Fatima began, her voice gentle. "You become a part of this place, and that's a good thing. But I also sense that something is troubling you." Savannah looked down into her tea, a steam swirling in the dim light. She tried to bury her past, to move forward without dwelling on her mistakes. But Fatima's perceptiveness was impossible to ignore. "It's nothing," Savannah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just adjusting." Fatima's eyes were soft but unwavering. "Sometimes the hardest part of starting over is letting go of the past. But you must understand that true redemption comes from within. It's not about erasing what's been done, but about choosing to walk a new path." Savannah swallowed hard. The truth in Fatima's words was undeniable, but accepting it was another matter entirely. She had taken a path of desperation, driven by the need to save her family. The burden of her actions was heavy, and the guilt was a constant companion. Yet, as she looked around the shelter, she saw hope and healing in the faces of others who had sought refuge here. Fatima continued, "Every journey begins with a single step, and each step leads you further from the past. You're here now, and that means you have a chance to build something new. You have a choice. You can let your past define you, or you can use it to fuel your growth." The words resonated with Savannah. It was not just about escaping her past, but about forging a new future. She needed to confront her fears and doubts, to face the reality of her actions and find a way to make amends. The next day, Savannah took a deep breath and decided to seek out a path for herself. The city was vast and full of opportunities, but it also had its share of challenges. She knew she needed to find work, but more importantly, she needed to contribute in a meaningful way, to find purpose beyond her immediate survival. She began by exploring the city, visiting various markets, workshops, and businesses. Her experiences and skills, though limited, were valuable. She had worked hard to provide for her family, and that resilience could be translated into various jobs. The city was a place of both hope and harsh reality, and finding her place would require persistence and adaptability. One day, while wandering through a bustling market, Savannah noticed a small shop with a sign that read, "Handcrafted goods, help needed." The shop was filled with beautiful handmade items, textiles, jewelry, and pottery. The owner, a woman named Layla, was busy arranging her merchandise. Savannah hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The shop's interior was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of freshly woven fabric and the soft hum of a spinning wheel. Layla looked up and greeted her with a friendly smile. "Hello," Layla said. "Can I help you with something?" "I saw your sign," Savannah said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I'm looking for work. I'm willing to learn and help in any way I can." Layla's eyes assessed Savannah with a mixture of curiosity and interest. "Well, we could use an extra pair of hands around here. What skills do you have?" Savannah thought for a moment. "I don't have much experience, but I'm a fast learner and very hardworking. I've done various odd jobs before, and I'm eager to contribute." Layla nodded thoughtfully. "All right, let's give it a try. You can start with some simple tasks and see how it goes. We'll see if you fit in." Savannah's heart swelled with relief and excitement. She started working at the shop, learning the intricacies of crafting and customer service. Layla was patient and supportive, teaching her new skills and guiding her through the work. Savannah found solace in the routine and a sense of accomplishment in each completed task. As she settled into her new role, Savannah also began to interact more with the other workers and customers. She found a sense of belonging and gradually started to heal from the emotional wounds of her past. The work was fulfilling and she was beginning to see a future that extended beyond mere survival. One evening, after a particularly successful day at the shop, Savannah returned to the shelter with a sense of pride. Fatima noticed the change in her demeanor and approached her with a warm smile. "You look different," Fatima observed. "There's a lightness to you that wasn't there before." Savannah nodded, her eyes shining with newfound hope. "I've found work. It's not much, but it's a start, and I'm starting to feel like I belong here." Fatima's smile widened. "That's wonderful to hear. You're making progress, and that's what matters. Remember, each day is a step forward. The past may have shaped you, but it doesn't define your future." Savannah took Fatima's words to heart. The path to redemption and self-forgiveness was still a journey, but she was walking it with renewed purpose. Each day at the shop, each interaction with her new community was a testament to her resilience and determination. As she prepared for another day of work, Savannah looked out at the city that had become both a refuge and a battleground. The future was still uncertain, but she was no longer running from her past. Instead, she was embracing the possibility of a new beginning, one step at a time. And so, with each sunrise, Savannah continued her journey, carrying with her the lessons learned and the hope of a brighter tomorrow. The light of new beginnings, the city with all its vibrant chaos had begun to feel like a second home to Savannah. The rhythms of daily life at Layla's shop brought a comforting stability, and the community of Fatima's shelter offered her a sense of belonging she had not known in a long time. Despite the challenges, Savannah was finding her place, and the once looming shadows of her past were beginning to recede, replaced by the promise of a better future. Months passed, and Savannah's life continued to transform. She had become adept at various tasks within the shop, from crafting intricate textiles to assisting customers with their selections. Layla had taken note of her dedication and work ethic, and Savannah felt a growing sense of pride in her accomplishments. Each day brought new opportunities to learn and grow, and she embraced them with enthusiasm. The city itself was a constant source of inspiration. The bustling markets, the colorful festivals, and the diverse people she encountered all contributed to her evolving perspective. Savannah found solace in the city's energy, a stark contrast to the quiet desperation of her village. It was as if each street, each face, held a story waiting to be discovered. One crisp autumn morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the shop's windows, Savannah was greeted with unexpected news. Layla approached her with a serious expression, holding a letter in her hands. "Savannah," Layla began, "this letter came for you today. It's from someone named Fatima." Savannah's heart skipped a beat. Fatima had been a source of guidance and support, and she couldn't imagine why she would be sending a letter. She took the envelope with trembling hands and carefully opened it. The letter inside was written in neat, flowing script. "Dear Savannah, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to share some important news with you. The Safe Haven for Travelers is in need of a new outreach coordinator. This role involves managing the shelter's resources, coordinating with local organizations, and assisting travelers in finding new opportunities. Given your experience and growth, I believe you are more than capable of handling this responsibility. It would be an opportunity for you to give back to the community that has supported you and to continue your journey of redemption and purpose. If you are interested, please let me know, and we can discuss the details further. With warm regards, Fatima." Savannah's eyes filled with tears as she read the letter. The opportunity to contribute to the shelter that had been her refuge was both humbling and exhilarating. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose welling up inside her. This was her chance to make a difference, to help others in the way she had been helped. She turned to Layla, her face glowing with excitement. "I want to accept the position. I want to help the shelter." Layla's smile was warm and approving. "I'm glad to hear that. It's a significant role, and I have no doubt you'll excel at it." With newfound determination, Savannah prepared to transition into her new role. Fatima welcomed her back to the shelter with open arms, and Savannah was soon immersed in the responsibilities of outreach coordination. The role involved a mix of administrative tasks, community engagement, and direct support for travelers. It was a demanding position, but Savannah embraced the challenge with a sense of purpose. One of her first tasks was to organize a community event to raise awareness about the shelter and its services. The event was designed to bring together local businesses, organizations, and residents to support the shelter's mission. Savannah worked tirelessly, coordinating with vendors, designing promotional materials, and reaching out to potential sponsors. The day of the event arrived, and the shelter's courtyard was transformed into a vibrant space filled with colorful banners, food stalls, and music. The community turned out in force, showing their support and enthusiasm. Savannah moved among the crowd, engaging with guests and sharing the shelter's story. The event was a resounding success, raising significant funds and forging new connections within the community. As Savannah continued her work at the shelter, she began to see the impact of her efforts. She received letters of gratitude from travelers who had found new hope and opportunities through the shelter's services. Her interactions with the community reinforced her belief in the power of kindness and the importance of giving back. Despite the progress she had made, Savannah still carried the weight of her past actions. The guilt lingered, a reminder of the choices she had made and the consequences they had wrought. She struggled with the fear that her past might catch up with her, that her actions might one day be exposed. One evening, as she sat alone in the shelter's office, Fatima approached her with a thoughtful expression. She could sense the internal struggle Savannah was facing. "You've done remarkable work here," Fatima said gently, "but I can see that you're still carrying a heavy burden. You don't have to do this alone. It's important to remember that you are not defined by your past mistakes, but by how you choose to move forward." Savannah nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I want to make things right. I want to be the person I know I can be, but the fear of my past catching up with me is always there." Fatima placed a comforting hand on Savannah's shoulder. "The past can be a shadow, but it doesn't have to control your future. Focus on the positive changes you've made and the lives you've touched. Redemption is a journey, not a destination." Encouraged by Fatima's words, Savannah began to explore ways to address her past actions more directly. She sought legal advice to understand the potential consequences and to explore options for making amends. She also considered reaching out to local organizations that focused on supporting those in need, hoping to contribute in meaningful ways. Through these efforts, Savannah found a sense of closure and empowerment. She continued her work at the shelter with renewed vigor, knowing that her actions were making a tangible difference. The city, once a place of overwhelming complexity, had become a canvas for her new life, a life defined by resilience, purpose, and hope. As the seasons changed and the city transitioned into winter, Savannah looked back on her journey with a mixture of pride and humility. The challenges she had faced were far from over, but she had transformed them into opportunities for growth and service. Her past was a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. In the quiet moments of reflection, Savannah understood that her journey was far from complete. The path to redemption was ongoing, marked by the choices she made each day and the impact she had on those around her. The city, with all its complexities and opportunities, was her new home, a place where she could continue to build a life of meaning and purpose. As she walked through the city streets, the cold winter air invigorating her senses, Savannah felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been arduous, but it had led her to a place of hope and renewal. The future was still uncertain, but she was ready to face it with the courage and determination that had carried her this far. And so, with each step forward, Savannah embraced the promise of new beginnings, guided by the lessons of her past and the hope of a brighter future. Embracing the future, winter had settled over the city, blanketing it in a layer of snow that sparkled under the streetlights. The cold air was crisp, and the city's usual hustle had slowed to a more contemplative pace. For Savannah, the snow-covered streets were a symbol of both the challenges and the fresh starts that lay ahead. Her journey had been long, marked by adversity, redemption, and self-discovery. As the year drew to a close, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come and what the future might hold. The shelter's outreach efforts had made significant strides under Savannah's coordination. Her work had not only improved the shelter's operations, but had also strengthened its ties with the local community. The recent community event had been a highlight, bringing together diverse groups to support a common cause. Savannah had seen firsthand the power of collective effort and kindness in transforming lives. Despite her achievements, Savannah remained humble. Her daily interactions with the shelter's guests and her work in the community were reminders of the ongoing need for compassion and support. She knew that her past actions, while a part of her story, did not define her entire future. Instead, she had the power to shape that future through her choices and actions. One chilly December morning, as Savannah walked to the shelter, she received an unexpected phone call. It was from a journalist named Jimmo, who was working on a feature story about local heroes who had overcome significant personal struggles and made a positive impact on their communities. He had heard about Savannah's work and wanted to interview her. Savannah was initially hesitant. She had always preferred to stay in the background, focusing on the work rather than seeking attention. But after some encouragement from Fatima and Leela, she agreed to meet with Jamal. The opportunity to share her story and highlight the shelter's mission was something she could not pass up. Jamal's visit to the shelter was warm and engaging. He interviewed Savannah in the cozy office that had become her workspace, surrounded by the comfort of the shelter's community. Savannah spoke candidly about her experiences, her struggles with poverty, her difficult decision to take the money, and her journey toward redemption and new beginnings. Jamal listened attentively, his questions thoughtful and probing. He was genuinely interested in Savannah's story and the impact of her work. The interview flowed naturally, and Savannah found herself opening up about her hopes for the future and the lessons she had learned along the way. As the interview concluded, Jomo assured Savannah that her story would be told with the respect and depth it deserved. He praised her for her courage and resilience, and she felt a sense of validation that she hadn't anticipated. The story would not only shed light on her personal journey, but also bring attention to the important work being done at the shelter. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The feature article, once published, garnered widespread attention and brought even more support to the shelter. Donations increased, and new volunteers stepped forward to contribute their time and resources. Savannah was amazed by the outpouring of support and felt a renewed sense of purpose. Amidst this new wave of activity, Savannah took time to reflect on her personal growth. She had come to understand that true redemption was not about erasing the past, but about using it as a foundation for positive change. Her experiences had shaped her, but they had also driven her to seek out ways to make a difference. One evening, as she walked home through the snowy streets, Savannah encountered a familiar face. It was a young woman named Amina, who had recently arrived at the shelter seeking help. Amina's story was a stark reminder of the harsh realities faced by many, and Savannah had taken a special interest in her case. "Savannah," Amina called out, her voice filled with gratitude. "I'd wanted to thank you personally. Your support has meant so much to me. I found a job and a place to stay, and I feel hopeful for the first time in a long while." Savannah's heart warmed at Amina's words. She had worked closely with Amina, helping her navigate the challenges of finding stable employment and housing. The young woman's progress was a testament to the shelter's mission and Savannah's dedication. "You're very welcome, Amina," Savannah replied, her voice steady. "I'm glad to see you finding your way. Remember, you're not alone in this journey." As Amina walked away, Savannah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her journey had come full circle in many ways. The hardships she had faced, the choices she had made, and the steps she had taken toward redemption had led her to a place where she could make a meaningful impact on others. The end of the year brought a time for celebration and reflection. The shelter hosted a holiday gathering, bringing together guests, staff, and supporters. It was a joyous occasion filled with laughter, music, and a shared sense of community. Savannah looked around the room, seeing the faces of those she had helped and those who had supported her along the way. Fatima approached Savannah with a smile, holding a small gift. "You've done an incredible job this year. Your hard work and dedication have made a real difference." Savannah accepted the gift with a sense of appreciation. "Thank you, Fatima. I couldn't have done it without your guidance and support." As the night wore on, Savannah found herself lost in thought. The past year had been a journey of transformation, marked by both personal and professional milestones. She had faced her fears, embraced her strengths, and found purpose in her work. The future remained uncertain, but Savannah felt a deep sense of hope and determination. The city, with its challenges and opportunities, had become a place where she could continue to grow and contribute. Her story was one of resilience and redemption, and she was ready to write the next chapters with the same courage and commitment that had brought her this far. As the first snowflakes of the new year began to fall, Savannah stood at the shelter's doorstep, looking out at the city that had become her new home. The journey had been arduous, but it had led her to a place of hope and renewal. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead, guided by the lessons of her past and the promise of a brighter future. And so, with each step forward, Savannah embraced the new year with a renewed sense of purpose and optimism. The future was hers to shape, and she was determined to make it a reflection of the strength and compassion that had defined her journey. The path ahead was filled with possibilities, and Savannah was prepared to walk it with the same courage and resilience that had carried her through the darkest times. The snow continued to fall gently, covering the city in a blanket of white. For Savannah, it symbolized the clean slate of a new beginning, one that was filled with promise and hope. As she stepped into the new year, she did so with a heart full of gratitude and a spirit ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Her journey was far from over, but Savannah knew that with each step she took, she was moving closer to a future defined by her strength, compassion, and unwavering determination. The city, once a place of uncertainty, had become a canvas for her new life, a life filled with possibility and hope.